told that we will have a briefing from Secretary Austin about the strike of last night. But it's so sad because this leader of the ISIS, maybe it's what they believe or whatever, but he decided that he would blow himself up and his children and his family with him as well. That's what happened last night. This week, it's a very happy week for us because that Competes Act is on the floor. It's a momentous one for the future of America's workers and the economy. And as the House passes the Competes Act, ensuring our nation is preeminent in manufacturing, in innovation, and in economic strength. It's about research. I want to salute our chair of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, Madam Chair Eddie Bernice Johnson, for the great work that she has done largely in a bipartisan way. I don't know if the votes will reflect that, but the bills that came out of her committee, as well as some of which passed on the floor, passed in a strong bipartisan way. Here's what we get here. We have always been a beacon of excellence in science and engineering and innovation in the world. And we invested in education and innovation and the rest. Then other countries copied our path, and they emerged as well. So we have competition now. Some of them, one, the People's Republic of China, a country of concern, threatens our ability to be as preeminent as we want to be. The technologies we rely on today and the technologies on the future must be made here in America. And this is what is happening in the Biden administration to make us more self-sufficient with American workers. It's an imperative for America's security and the financial security of America's workers and our families that we are self-sufficient. Competes meets this challenge, and I'm going to take the time to talk about Competes because it's a very, where is it? This is not the bill. This is just what we sent out about the bill. It's very intense. It's intensive. Competes meets this challenge first by investing $52 billion to support the manufacture of chips and semiconductors. Do you know how many chips are in an electric car? 2,000. Non-electric car, 1,000. But the absence of chips is hindering our manufacturing of cars. We need more chips, and we need them to be made in America. They are the lifeblood of modern technology, but are increasingly being made abroad, again, sometimes in countries of concern, leaving us vulnerable on supply chain issues. And that makes cost higher, and it contributes to inflation. We are bringing production back. So that's $52 billion, chips, semiconductors. Secondly, the CHIPS Act invests $45 billion to support manufacture and acquisition of critical goods or industrial equipment essential for our national security. And I'm going to read you this from here and hope that you would read this. It authorizes $45 billion for grants, loans, and loan guarantees to support supply chain resilience and manufacturing of critical goods, industrial equipment, as I say, and manufacturing technology. This is how it relates to our economy and our families. Supports the manufacturing or equipment acquisition of critical goods or industrial equipment that are essential for the national security and economic vitality. Critical goods include key components and products for public health, biological preparedness, information and communications technologies, energy and transportation sector industrial base, and agricultural commodities and food product supply chains. This is a magnificent piece of work, and I'm very eager. I'm very proud of the support it has had, as I said, in a bipartisan way. I don't know if that would be in the votes. So I told you something about that. I can talk more about it if you want. But we must continue to reduce our dependence on goods made in other countries, especially countries of concern, and bring production back home. Said one was the 2 billion for chips. The second was 45 billion for the supply chain. Third, and this is not about money, but with the bipartisan bills that are contained in this, we are advancing U.S. scientific research and innovation excellence to ensure that we lead the technologies of the future. And fourth, we're positioning U.S. interest and values to win on the world stage, holding the People's Republic of China accountable for using slave labor, which is a human rights issue and hurts U.S. workers. Okay, so again, more American goods made here at home lowers costs and strengthens supply chains for America, ensures that America, not the People's Republic of China, writes the rules of the road for the 21st century. Speaking of the People's Republic of China, before I came here, and that's why I'm a few minutes late, I testified at and then listened to the testimony at the Congressional Executive Commission on China hearing. Tomorrow, the Olympic Games begin in China, and we heard from voices of the oppressed who spoke out on human rights violations being perpetrated by the host nation. While we fully support our athletes and have not called for a boycott by the athletes, we cannot be silent on human rights in China. We called for a diplomatic boycott, but not an athletic one. That's last year, called for no official U.S. presence at the Games, which President Biden has supported. Other countries have followed our lead. For example, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Belgium, Denmark, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, the Baltic states. Meanwhile, as Congress, I wish you could have heard the testimony, and it was live streamed, perhaps some of you saw, of the witnesses. They were so eloquent in representing every aspect of human rights violations, including genocide. But what's important to note and how it relates to economy is that when you talk about the Uyghurs and the camps that these people are sent to and the rest, when we talk about genocide, that would be enough justification to oppose what the PRC is doing, but it's not the only reason. What it does is say to American workers, you must compete with slave labor. And they were very eloquent in presenting how pervasive the cotton made in the Uyghur camps and the rest is not only as a resource to perhaps U.S. manufacturers, but others as well. So this is not just a human rights issue, it's an unfair trade issue as well. Again, we are, of course, the subject at hand is the omnibus bill that Rosa DeLauro is brilliantly taking the lead on, setting us for a strong omnibus to address critical priorities for the American people. Right now, we are going back and forth with authors between the Democrats and Republicans, and we're hoping to reach a deal on a top line very soon on that. I know that's an issue that you're concerned about because that relates to schedule. And speaking of schedule, I am very proud that on schedule our goal was to reach 1,000 infrastructure events. We're nearly 1,300 infrastructure. I think it's 1,271 infrastructure events so far around the country. Again, about bridges and roads and water supply, getting the lead out, broadband, issues that relate to safety on our streets, even some relationship to addressing the climate crisis. As we spread the word of our victories for the Democrats, we remain hard at work to help to pass BBB as well as voting rights. One connection between infrastructure and omnibus is that some of the money in the infrastructure bill cannot be freed up until we pass the omnibus bill. So for these and other reasons, to meet the needs of the people, to show that Democrats deliver for the people, and we want to do so in a strong bipartisan way, we have to get that. We're hoping to get that done as soon as possible in terms of the infrastructure bill. the omnibus bill. Any questions?
Madam Speaker, a new Instagram account called Dear White Staffers has been collecting troubling accounts.
Excuse me, can we, if you got something extraneous, I'm happy to get to it, but let's
no,
talk,
but
we're
you-
trying to keep government open,
But
we're
what do you
trying
say
to be preeminent in the world, and I'm happy to come back to that.
But
Any
what do you say to
questions
staffers who
on what
are-
we're doing
who
here?
are on
Jake,
food
what do you
stamps
got?
in this building?
What do you have?
I'm wondering about sanctions, Russia sanctions.
Yeah.
Where do you land? Are you in favor of preemptive sanctions? What is your general thinking at the moment?
We have two a bill in the Senate, the Menendez bill, and then in the House, Mr. Meeks's bill from his committee. They're on a similar path. There are those, someone on the Republican side who would like to have the preemptive, have these sanctions first. You asked me where I come down, and in keeping with the guidance from my committee chair, Mr. Meeks, and the administration, I think it's really important for us to use the sanctions if the Russians strike. It is important because it's where leverage is at maximum. If they do this, then we strike. It is where also most of our allies are on this, and that is a very important part of this, how we work jointly on it, and that is why I support using sanctions if they invade.
And how about how drastic do you want sanctions to be if they invade? I mean, are you in favor of kicking them out of the SWIFT financial system? I mean, what do you see?
Well, the committee, I think they have to be very much more forceful than they have been, because we're talking about an invasion of a country. We're talking about NATO countries being at risk if the Russians succeed in Ukraine. So this is deadly serious. So they have to feel the pain, and it has to be felt right up to the richest man in the world, Vladimir Putin. Nobody knows what he's going to do except him, and that's why we have to be prepared for whatever that may be. But I do think that they have to be strong enough to be effective. They have to be done after and if they invade, and they have to be done in compliance with our allies working together. Yeah.
Madam
Yes,
Speaker,
yeah.
on the January 6th committee, we know that their scope keeps getting bigger. We know they're looking at timelines leading up to the attack, where key people were and what they were doing and so forth. I wonder, have you provided any kind of testimony or documents to the committee?
No. I keep as far away from the committee as possible. If they asked me, I would, but I don't. I was on the podium and then I was swept away.
Do you
But
expect to be asked about things like
I had no idea.
security or evacuation procedures? Or
I had no idea. I know about what they do the way you do in the public domain. We authorize them. We give them the resources they need to do what they do. But that is the work of the committee. It has nothing to do with me. Yes, ma'am.
Madam Speaker, on that legislation by Congressman Meeks, once it's done and when it's ready,
Yeah.
do you plan to fast track that, bring it straight to the House floor, possibly skipping markup? And then I just wonder if you can respond. We heard some comments from Senator Joe Manchin this week saying that Build Back Better is dead. I know in your previous press conference you referenced possibly that it could be renamed or rebranded, taking some of
Well,
the-
you got a couple different questions there. Before you go on to a third, let me address the first two.
We can go.
First, we're going to be briefed. Mr. Meeks will be presiding on our side at the briefing, the Ukraine briefing, and we want to move quickly with these. Now, that'll be up to the chairman as to the process and the rest. But we want to be as close to the Senate bill as possible so there's no delay in getting something to the president's desk. The second part is I'm never giving up on BBB. There's so much in there that is really important in terms of child tax credit, in terms of family health care for families, that is to say not just children, but seniors or siblings with disabilities and the rest, with universal pre-K. This is it's about lowering cost for the American people, lowering the cost of health care, lowering the cost of child care, lowering the cost of family care, lowering the cost of education at the pre-K level, and we must get something done. And of course, a very important part of it is what we're doing about the climate crisis. And there are plenty of things in there where I think that we can find common ground. So I'm not giving up on the PPP.
Potentially, I know you mentioned it could possibly rename.
What that's incidental. I mean, what's important is what's in the legislation. Lowers cost, increases pay, and is completely paid for. So one other thing about it is when we talk about inflation, people say, oh, you're spending money on this or that. This is completely paid for. Not only is it paid for, it will, in fact, reduce the national debt because it is, we raised so much more money because we thought we were going to do so much more. So I'm very, we cannot abandon it. We must proceed. Now, yes, ma'am.
Madam Speaker, just continuing on Ukraine, I know you have the briefing coming up shortly, but do you have any knowledge or concern about reports that Russia could create some type of false pretext to attack? It appears U.S. officials may have evidence to that.
Well, I don't want, we'll get our classified briefing and be more up to date on it, but the fact is there are troops amassed at the eastern border of Ukraine. Whether it is imminent or not, we have to be ready for it whenever it is. And again, we have concerns that we share with other NATO countries in the region. So we have to be prepared. What we hear is no one but the man himself knows what he's going to do. And I'm very pleased that our Secretary of State has engaged in diplomacy, because diplomacy deterrence is what we want to see succeed. Diplomacy deterrence. The Secretary Blinken has been forceful in that engagement, but that engagement also, in order to be good peacemakers, you have to show that you can be a good fighter, I always say. So we'll see. But in terms of their intention, I have nothing to share with you about the intelligence on that here. Yeah. What do you got?
So, follow up on Ukraine and Russia. Obviously, last summer, the House
Then I'll take you now.
approved to revoke the AUMFs from 01 and 02 here.
Yeah.
But there has been some concern by progressives in the House, Barbara Lee, who was the only one who voted against the Afghanistan resolution, no one said we should lean on diplomacy first. Are you concerned about the military moving these troops, even though they're not going to have boots on the ground, and what the concerns are about members of your caucus who say, we just repealed these AUMFs, what is Congress's role as it pertains to war powers to be involved in moving these troops forward in Europe?
Well, you have a multifaceted question, but the fact is we have to do a new AUMF, authorization for the use of military force. What is there is stale, old, and we have to do it. It's challenging because you have to decide on many things. The authorization for what? What is the purpose? What is the scope? What is the timetable? And what is the geography? And that's why we haven't had another one since, because we have to come to agreement on that.
Would it pertain to something like this, what we're seeing right now in Eastern Europe?
To moving those troops? I don't think so, no.
Well, but why not?
Because they're, no, I don't think it does. I don't think we need an AUMF for that in terms of the scope and the threat that is there. You don't have, nor do I, a definition of what the purpose of those troops there are. They are a confidence builder for our allies in the region, and they are, if need be, for where we go next, we'll make some judgment. But right now, just to move those troops, no. Your question.
Madam Speaker, do you support staffer attempts to unionize here in Congress?
Well, we just unionized at the DCCC, and I supported that. Yeah, I supported that.
I have a question about so I'm wondering, in the bill, the Competes Act, it actually, it tries to increase cooperation with China to address climate change. So So I'm just wondering, how can you ensure that while increasing that cooperation, you can also be sure that the Chinese Communist Party is taking the sanctions in Xinjiang seriously and not try to get around those sanctions?
Well, we are very serious about the Uyghur legislation that we passed in a bipartisan way. Senator Rubio and Chris Smith on the Republican side, Senate and House, Jim McGovern, Congresswoman Wexton, Senator Merkley, and others. This has been bipartisan and bicameral. So nobody should be misunderstand how serious we are about that. When we pass the appropriations bill, we'll have the funding to fund our follow-up on checking on what companies might be using products coming from prison labor camps, making our workers compete with prison labor. The Chinese, we certainly, I've taken second place to no one in this Congress in my criticism of China for over 30 years, since Tiananmen Square, when I first came to Congress. And I fought them every step of the way on trade issues, on human rights issues, and on proliferation of weaponry and delivery systems over the years. I also have worked with them on issues that relate to climate. I've been to China on that very subject, where we have seen what they have been doing. They deserve credit for many of the things they were doing in terms of climate, but they still remain a major emitter, as do we, and we all have to do better, but we have made our decisions. It's in their interest. It's in their interest because they have a pollution problem that is a health issue there, and that becomes a political issue as well as an economic issue. So again, we cannot say, because we hope you'll do something on climate, that we can ignore the fact that you're committing genocide of a population in your country. That's just not going to happen. And I said, and I'll close with this, and that is that I've said it all the time. In fact, I've said it in Dharamsala with His Holiness the Dalai Lama standing right next to me. If we ignore human rights abuses in China because of commercial interest, then we lose all moral authority to talk about human rights any place in the world. What does it profit a person or a country to gain commercially and suffer the loss of its soul? We cannot do that. So again, let's have a balance in all of it. Recognize we share this planet, that we hope that we can work together with them diplomatically on climate where we have common ground, but we will not and cannot. They say, the Chinese, they say, and torturers generally say, the most sinister form of torture to a prisoner of conscience is that they say to them, nobody cares. They don't even remember you. They don't even know you're in jail or why. So why don't you just give it up? Well, we do everything we can to make sure that they know that we are publicizing these names, as we did this morning. Once again, not only us, but the witnesses who came reading the names of others. So again, what the Chinese are doing to these people and their families, if their families, for example, testify that their loved one is being imprisoned endlessly for practically nothing, it's act of cowardice on the part of the Chinese government to take it out on the children and families. And these Uyghurs, they send these people to these camps and then they take their children. I mean, this is diabolical. It's diabolical. So again, for over 30 years, I've been making that fight. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be. We work together on the Iran nuclear agreement. We can work together on climate issues. We can try to find common ground where we can. But that does not negate our commitment to our values. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
What happened to your 49ers?
Oh, don't break my heart. Don't break my heart.
Congratulate me on my
I thought he should have taken the sack. I coach on the side, you understand. And they should have gone for the 1 yard, but and nonetheless, nobody expected us to be where we were. I'm very proud of 49ers, 10 season ticket holders forever. On the other hand, the Warriors that, I was proud this week so far, we'll see where we go. And the most recent game, not last night, we didn't play, night before, no Steph, no Clay, no Draymond, no Wiggins, and still.
Did you want a Bengals 49ers Super Bowl again?
I was there. I was
know.
there in Miami with my family, my kids and all. So they were little then. It was a long time ago. It would have been good. So we'll see how it goes. Of course, I'm in California, so I'll be rooting for the Rams.
Thank you.